imagine a U.S. veteran who believes that Iran is better than America. Holy crap. If you're a bad faith right-winger, you will latch onto that and focus on how outrageous that is. And you'll say things like, hey, I mean, it's just like low IQ stuff, right? No depth. Ignore all the substance that I'm going to talk about and focus on, if you love Iran so much, why don't you go to Iran, right? Go to Iran and see what happens to you, right? But you got to listen to what my point is. Clearly, as countries go, America, I believe, is far better than Iran. However, context matters. This video is a response to the claims about Iran being one of the biggest state sponsors of terror, and they keep saying things like Iran has killed more Americans or a ton of Americans. They just give these large numbers of thousands of Americans killed by Iran. This is a tactic that is used a lot, especially on the right, but not only on the right, where you say ambiguous things to elicit an emotional response, right? You just simply say something as shocking as Iran killed thousands of Americans, right? Someone who's maybe leaning on the side of, maybe we shouldn't be there and this sounds kind of wrong, blah, blah, blah. And then you say, oh, they've killed thousands of Americans. Now, a lot of lack of critical thinking Americans hear that and have an emotional response like, oh, wow, well, I mean, you know, if they're killing Americans, then, you know, we need to do something about that. So maybe there's some logic to what we're doing in Iran, right? We got to defend ourselves, right? America has a right to defend itself. America has a right to defend itself, right? The problem is, for someone that is not low IQ and has critical thinking, your first response when someone says Iran has killed all these people and they're sponsoring all this terrorism or whatever is, what are you talking about? When you say thousands of Americans, what's the exact number? Not literally the exact number, but in general, don't just say thousands. Like, give me a number so I can understand what it is you're talking about. And then back it up with something. Again, I don't need you to, you're not being bad faith. I don't need you to give me some kind of scientific report and, you know, it's got to be precise to the whatever. No, but at least give me something that's not ambiguous. That's not something that could easily be made up. Because, for example, look at what I'm going to do right now. Haiti is a country that we should go to Haiti with our military, and we should get them under control. Because if you look at a country like Haiti, I mean, they have been just absolutely brutal in killing so many Americans. They have done so much destruction to America. So I'm just saying stuff like Haiti numbers. I could just say stuff, right? And if I'm talking to low IQ people who are already kind of biased in my direction, you know, I don't need to provide evidence to them. They'll just be like, oh yeah, right, and they'll repeat what I say. So we got to understand what they're talking about. But here's what I'm talking about when I say Iran is better than America. And obviously I'm being a little facetious when I say that. While at the same time, there is a demonstrable truth to that statement, but only in a very specific framework, which we're going to discuss. So, if we want to play games with emotionally loaded words and statements and frame Iran as such a massive threat to quote-unquote Americans, then we need to examine the deaths caused by America versus Iran. And as a veteran, as an American, if we have this conversation,
caution.
it is quite disappointing, quite embarrassing, and quite uncomfortable, to be honest, to admit the reality. But, you know, my existence for the last close to 30 years, professionally, and since you spend most of your life at work, leads into me as a person. You know, my existence for the last 30 years has been one of a high level of precision, right? The stuff that I do professionally requires a high level of precision and lack of emotional bias. You can imagine, I'm not a surgeon, but imagine that I was a surgeon, right? So I'm doing surgery. I gotta be very precise, right? 5 milligrams versus 10 milligrams could be the difference between life and death, right? Left arm versus right arm. Sounds like a small detail, but if I amputate the wrong arm and you still need to get amputated, now you have no arms, right? Tiny detail, left versus right. Massive consequences. That is the world that I live in, right? It's not medical, but it is very, very high stakes. I have to be very, very precise. And I have to stick with facts, right? I can't get, emotional to where maybe something, a high stress situation is happening and I'm nervous and I don't want to do this because I'm afraid. No, you got to do what is right based on what the facts show you. Even if your instincts might be leading you in a different direction, you have to rely on what the facts tell you. That is the world that I live in. That's the world that I've lived in for close to 30 years. And again, you spend most of your time at work, so this is going to bleed into who I am as a person. So from that framework, which puts me in a very unique position because, as I've always said, America is a very emotional country. This is a country where, was it a doctor that killed someone because of road rage? And even if that's not the exact detail, it is a fact that, many people have died or almost lost their lives over road rage, right? And many times the people who commit these atrocities are not even people who are, maybe normally violent or whatever. It's just normal people who, so emotional are they that someone cuts them off and they just lose it, right? So in a country like that, you can see why someone like Donald Trump could be president. In a country like that, you can understand how effective it could be to manipulate people and just say things like, oh, Iran has killed all these people and thousands of Americans and the biggest state sponsor of terror. In a country like that, that's very effective because a lot of people are just going to hear that. They're not going to look into it. They're not going to think very deeply about what you're saying. They're not going to recognize the patterns of people saying stuff like that are being ambiguous, intentionally, right? They're not going to pick up on that and, be on alert and recognize the pattern and be suspicious. Like, wait a minute. I've heard people say stuff that sounds like that, and they're being manipulative, they're being deceptive. Are you doing that right now? No. A lot of people will just be like, oh, they've killed thousands of Americans. So, where does the objective analysis take us? You can love America as I do and be an American citizen, while at the same time you can put that aside as your emotional state and replace that emotional state and your opinion or whatever with just raw data. Just raw data. Whatever raw data says, it is what it is, as they say. What happens when we do that? What happens when we pick up the data and we put the feelings aside and the opinions aside and what you think or what you thought? What does the data show? data shows that, number one, a lot of this rhetoric about how bad Iran is, and I would never be anyone to say they're a good country. In fact, my instincts tell me it's a very bad country, but the details matter. If you focus on the statements about how bad Iran is, and in particular the statements about how many Americans they've killed, again, as a critical thinker, someone who's not, you can't really manipulate me very effectively with just like emotionally charged words. So you can't just say they've killed Americans and be like, oh man, no, I want to know what you're talking about, right? That's the nature of my work. That's the nature of who I am as a person. I want to know what is the context. And because that is my perspective, that got me to be in perhaps a smaller group in this country, I'm sure, of people that realize what is actually being stated when people make these statements. What are they actually talking about? What are the numbers, and what is the context of these supposed American deaths? Okay. Let's start from the beginning. It is factually true that many Americans have been killed by the Iranians. You could, if you want to be including their proxies, whatever, I'll give it to you. All right. So if you say between Iran and their proxies, it is factually true that a high number of Americans have been killed. However, to simply state that without context, I think is a little bit deceptive, because it doesn't take very much time or effort to look into the source of these numbers, and then to rapidly everything changes drastically, because you'll quickly find out that the context of these numbers are military. An overwhelming majority of these numbers of Americans that have been killed are not civilians, they're military. And I'm making this statement as a veteran. So in theory, normally my bias would be towards being pro-military, but again, I'm not an emotional person. So even that being the case, as a veteran, I'm loyal to nothing but the truth, right? So I don't care if it's a group I'm associated with or have an affinity for. If the facts tell me something bad about that group, then it is what it is, right? I'm not going to hide from it. So with that being said, the fact that an overwhelming majority of these deaths caused by Iran are military deaths, so that's military people, not civilians, changes things drastically, especially when you put America's numbers up against Iran. I'm going to say that again. Once you realize that a lot of these pro-war people, when they say that Iran has killed thousands of Americans, when you realize that the numbers they're referring to are overwhelmingly of American military and not civilians, that alone drastically changes the reality, right? Because a lot of people have this emotional response when you see tons of Americans being killed. In their minds, I'm sure many people are thinking civilians, right? And they're thinking about themselves. Unfortunately, you know, it's not just an American thing. It's their nature as human beings. We're selfish. We're very egocentric. We're self-centered. So the idea of a lot of American civilians being killed, and the context also of talking about nuclear weapons, it's kind of like, okay, man, if they're killing us, and when I say us, I mean us, like we, the people, and now we're talking about nuclear bomb, which would make them kill even more people, that's really scary. But then when you change it to it's actually military people that they've killed, then it's kind of like, okay, you could be the biggest patriot, which means you probably don't refer to yourself as a patriot, because anyone who's a real patriot wouldn't call themselves a patriot in most cases. But if you're a real patriot, love America, then you're concerned about our troops being injured. However, that changes things, because again, we're very focused on ourselves. So you went from, you know, oh, this is a country that's killing us, and you think about terrorist attacks, and you know, maybe one day you're in a building or in a plane and they hijack it or whatever, and oh, that's kind of scary. and they're now talking about nuclear bombs. So maybe they drop a bomb on my city. So it's very, very personal, very, very me, right? But when you change it to military, and you're like, I'm not in the military, so this doesn't directly affect me. Now, this is an uncomfortable reality that this is how people think, but it is how people think, right? When you change it to military and someone who's not in the military, then it's kind of like, oh, it just doesn't have that effect. When you just ambiguously say they killed a lot of Americans, that is, to a lot of Americans hearing that, it's kind of like, oh, Iran, yeah, okay, well, maybe bomb them or do something there. We got to keep them under control because I don't want my family to be hurt. But then when it's like military, it's kind of like, oh, okay, well, what are we really talking about? And it gets much worse when you compare Iran numbers to American numbers. It's interesting because it was a conversation where I think it was Dave Smith was talking about America as terrorists, right? I'm not sure. Did I do a typo in my title? I see Charlie said something about spelling a problem, something. So when you compare the numbers in terms of casualties to civilians, America versus Iran, as I stated before, it gets a little bit uncomfortable. Because I am human. I'm not very emotionally driven, but I still am human. I'm not a robot. So the idea that my country, when compared to Iran, would do as poorly as we do, it's kind of a somber moment and realization, especially in the context of, as an objective thinker, you have to recognize that you could pick the most violent country out there, right? Legitimately violent country, and recognize that the people of that country probably don't see their country as a very violent country necessarily, unless of course it's a violent country where they're killing their civilians, right? As long as the country's not killing their civilians, I think they can do a high level of violence, and yet the people won't see their country as a terrorist country or something. So just pick a random country that you think is a terrorist country that does a lot of terrorism. If you speak to the average person in that country, assuming that the government is not killing civilians, their own civilians. If you ask them whether they think their country is a terrorist country, I'm pretty sure most people will say no. Even people that have great problems with their government and they don't like the political leaders and whatever. But when it comes to like, is your country a terrorist country? Almost no one, again, with the exception of countries that kill a lot of their own civilians, almost no one is going to be like, yeah, my country's a terrorist country, right? So when you consider that and you realize Americans are just humans, and you have to realize that it's going to be uncomfortable for Americans, just like any other country, to see their own country, as a terrorist country, right? But if, again, we stick with the facts and we put our emotions aside, America has killed hundreds of thousands of civilians since the 1980s. Hundreds of thousands of civilians. We provided weapons to Israel, because you could say a lot of stuff is in the past, way in the past. But we provided weapons to Israel, so this is more recent stuff, which were used to destroy hospitals and kill so many civilians. Bad faith actor can focus on the idea that they were going after the terrorists and all the civilian deaths were all accidental. But whether it's accidental or not, the reality is tons and tons of civilians have been killed, are being killed with our weapons, or weapons that were bought with our money. Hundreds of thousands of civilians have been killed by America. I would like you to do your own research and see how many civilians Iran has killed. Maybe I missed it, and you can inform me. Give me some numbers, events, some data. you know, an Iranian terrorist that blew up a building, hijacked the plane, you know, did some kind of attack on American soil, kidnapped some American tourists somewhere else on the globe. Now, obviously, I'm not saying this has never happened. I'm just saying do your best to get some numbers. And can you get 20? Can you get 50? How about 100? Can you find 100 American civilians that were killed by Iran? I don't know if you will. I really don't think you're gonna be able to get those kind of numbers. So America is a country that's killed hundreds of thousands of civilians, not military. Iran is a country that, compared to America, you could say relatively they haven't killed any civilians. Again, when you compare them to America, like if it's a competition about who's killing more civilians, the Iran numbers are irrelevant, right? It's like there's a boxing match, and you know, I don't know how much of a rounds we go through. I've made contact with your body, your face, whatever, I don't know, 100 times. And you've made contact with me 5 times. Am I talking about the Jake Paul fight? Anyway, if you've made contact with me 5 times, and I've made contact with you 100 times in a boxing match, relative to my hitting you 100 times, your 5 times is as if you didn't hit me at all, right? The result is you weren't even in the fight. You were just getting pounded, right? Technically, no, you did hit me 5 times, but again, what is the relevance of you hitting me 5 times when I've hit you 100 times in a boxing match? That is Iran versus America. Whatever number you can come up with in terms of civilian casualties from Iran are going to be so tiny that compared to hundreds of thousands, and by the way, I want to be clear, a bad faith actor will then, it's always like playing games and moving the goalposts, right? So the next movement will be, you'll focus on the fact that the hundreds of thousands is not hundreds of thousands of Iranian citizens. And that's not what I'm suggesting. I am adding up all of the civilian casualties. And I guess if you really want to fight this battle and die on this hill, then you would have to expand the search for Iranian civilian casualties in terms of civilians in other countries that Iran has killed, right? Not just Americans. I still think you're not even going to get to a fraction of what America has done. So if we look at this from an objective standpoint, who has more of a legitimate right that's based in some kind of logic or whatever you want to call it? Who has a better right of being more concerned or pointing the finger at the other? Is it Iran or is it America? Right? If you are another country, knowing that America has killed hundreds of thousands of civilians across the globe, right? You see us providing weapons to Israel and Israel killing all these civilians. You see our president threatening to destroy or kill an entire civilization, right? Are you more justified to be concerned about America or looking at America as a threat? Or are the Iranians more justified to be afraid of America and thinking of America as a threat? Now, let's just, again, put your feelings aside. Forget about what country you're from or what country you like or where you live. Who is more justified? If I live in Iran and I see America killing hundreds of thousands of civilians. They've got their military all over the place. We're bombing all over the place. We're doing drone strikes all over the place. We kidnapped a leader of one country. We decimated so many people and the leaders in Iran, and now, threatening the entire country. If you were in Iran, would you have a justified fear of America? And look, in terms of if you looked at America as a danger, if you saw them as terrorists and a threat to the world, I mean, put in their shoes, would that be justified, or at least more justified than for Americans to be afraid of Iran, who has killed next to no one in terms of our civilians? Who's more justified? We as Americans, afraid of Iran is a big danger, and they're gonna nuke us and all this kind of stuff. The country who, I'm sure if they really wanted to, they could have killed a bunch of our civilians, right? They could have done. I mean, remember, we had Biden as president, right? And Biden was the open borders. That's what we were told, right? Biden was open borders, right? Letting everybody in. So if that's the case, and Iran is really the way they're presenting Iran as, why is it that they didn't just have a bunch of their terrorist people just flooding in the country, and then don't wait until now? I mean, again, if they are so bad and they're such a big threat that they can't have nuclear weapons, right? Then there would have been tons of terrorist attacks from Iran under Biden, right? It's like something is not adding up. If we're to believe what we're being told, like it's open borders, wide open, flooding in, right? I'm not saying there weren't a bunch of people coming in the border. That's not what I'm saying. But if you're saying it's open borders and they're not enforcing the border and people are just flooding in and they're letting everybody in, then that means they would be letting in a bunch of Iranian terrorists. And what is stopping them from doing so many strikes, right? When Biden was president, bomb here, bomb over there, mass shooting over here, this attack, that attack, this attack. If they really wanted to kill Americans, they could have. Why didn't they? Right? The only one who's actively killing civilians around the globe to these kind of numbers is America. Because I care to know the truth, I actually looked it up, and I think we're in the top 4 of countries that has killed the most civilians. So if you live in a country that's in the top 4 of countries that kills the most civilians, is it rational for you to be so concerned about a country that's killed next to no one in your country as civilians? Is it rational for you to be so afraid of them that you'll justify all this destruction and the killing of these girls in the school? Like, all that stuff is like, okay, well, it's worth it because these guys are so bad. When you live in a country that's killed hundreds of thousands of civilians, is it rational for you to be afraid of them, or is it rational for them to be afraid of us? If you stick to the facts and put your feelings aside, where does that place you in terms of how you look at this? Like, what is the rational position? Terrified of Iran? I mean, unfortunately, you should be afraid of Iran now because, I mean, if you're going to go and bomb and kill all their leaders, I mean, it's kind of like back in school and you had this quiet kid who never was in a fight, never messed with anybody, just kept to himself, right? And I guess if I want to make it more accurate, maybe he had some beefs here and there, and he ended up in I'll give him a couple fights, right? But he's not a violent person. He's not a bully or whatever. He's kind of quiet, keeps to himself, right? But sometimes people mess with him, and he responds and he hits them or whatever, right? And then you're going to fearmonger and say this kid is dangerous. Look, he beat up that other kid last week or whatever. And then you're going to start pounding this kid. Every time he shows up for school, 10 kids jump on him, right? Put him in a hospital. And you keep doing this for a period of a couple weeks, right? So the kid that really mostly keep to himself, not a violent kid, but he got a couple fights, right? And you're fear-mongering about how dangerous this kid is. And then you go and you beat him up over and over again. You beat up his sister, you know, you really do real bad things to this kid. I mean, it's a potential that you've created. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. Now you've created an actual threat, because now this kid he's angry, right? And he might just snap one day, and who knows what he'll do. So we've pushed Iran to potentially snap. Like we were in, before this war, we were a country, no one was thinking about Iran. There was no, oh, remember last year the Iranians, they had a terrorist attack in Los Angeles or something. Oh, remember, I can't believe it's been 10 years since Iran knocked down those towers or whatever, right? That's not the world we were living in. We're living in a world where no one was talking about Iran, no one was thinking about Iran. There were no news stories about Iran killing civilians or whatever. That's the world we were living in. Now we're in a world where we just so brutally attacked a country that didn't attack us. Put them in a corner. So what happens next? Unfortunately, it's not going to be good. But in a battle of which country is better when it comes to civilian casualties, Iran decimates America. That is just a fact of the matter. That's not a pro-Iran position or an anti-American position. That is a factual position. That is a reality-based position. I would never, like, these are uncomfortable things for me to say. I don't want to say that that is the truth, but I can only say the truth regardless of what the truth is. And this is the truth. We have been raised to think of ourselves as we're always the good guys and we're the heroes in every story, but the reality is America is a threat to the world. Now, my perspective is I want America to be better. I want us to not be a threat to the world. And for people that just struggle to accept reality, what do I mean by a threat to the world? I mean, if you're putting aside the hundreds of thousands of civilians that are dead because of America, right? And let's not play any games. Every single civilian death, there's some, I'm not even going to characterize the quality of the excuse, but there's always going to be an excuse, right? It's just like a gangster that kills a rival gang member, right? You look at that as that's savage and violent, but that gangster has an explanation, right? Oh, he killed one of ours, right? So of course, every civilian death, oh, it was a mistake. Okay, but whatever the story is, it's a reality. Like, imagine if I was accidentally killing dozens of people every week, right? I don't mean to, but I'm doing it. How much relevance is it that I'm accidentally killing people? Like this is a serious question. If I was accidentally killing dozens of people every week, how much relevance is it that I'm accidentally killing people? I think from a legal standpoint, you will know that it's not much, right? I'm pretty sure I can get charged with some kind of reckless endangerment, because if I'm doing something that's killing people and I continue to do it, right, I'm pretty sure there's some pretty serious consequences, because the law is going to lean heavily on the outcome as opposed to the intention. The intention is considered, of course, But you can't have somebody doing something that is actively killing people and they continue doing it even if it's not intentional. You can't have that be a thing without some serious consequences, right? So even if you want to justify that every time we as a country, our military kills civilians, that it's a mistake, it's collateral damage or whatever it is, the fact that we kill so many civilians, that reality is so much stronger than our intention. I mean, it's good. Factually, it makes it a little bit better if it's even half the time it's accidental, right? That's certainly worse. That's certainly better than if it's always intentional, right? Or it's always just like reckless. If half the time it's just purely accidental, these things happen. But the reality is, for us to kill so many civilians makes us a massive threat to the world on that level alone. But look at what's happening right now. The world economy is being devastated because of one country, not Iran, right? If America did not go and bomb Iran, the globe would not be suffering the economic conditions we are, right? The Strait of Hormuz would be open. The oil would be flowing. We wouldn't be paying, I'm looking at a sign right now, $5.80 for diesel, $4 for premium, $4.07, $3.97 for regular gas, right? We wouldn't be paying that if America didn't bomb Iran. Like, we did that. We have caused so much suffering across the globe, all because we wanted to bomb a country that has, relatively compared to what we have done, they've killed almost no Americans, right? It's again, the Americans they kill are military. In terms of civilians, it's like they don't really kill our civilians almost at all, right? So that makes them really not really a threat to America at all. So why the hell are we bombing them, right? Like, the logic that a country that, they're not willing to send somebody through the Joe Biden open borders who's just going to buy a gun in Texas where it's easy to buy a gun and shoot a bunch of people, like, just to kill, 20, 30, like, the country that's not even willing to do that, right? Tons of attacks they could have done under Joe Biden would be open borders, right? But they're not even willing to do that, but they're going to nuke us though. It's funny, but it's not funny. It's not even like they're doing the thing and they're already doing it. Now they make us feel that way when they say thousands of Americans. And a lot of the deaths, not only the soldiers, but it's from the 80s. They got to go way back to the 80s. So the reason why we're bombing them now and causing all this global pain is because they killed a bunch of our soldiers in the 80s? What? So a country that's not even interested enough in killing Americans to simply do some little terrorist attacks here and there, shootings, whatever, some little bombing thing, whatever. They're not willing to do that, but we're supposed to believe that us attacking them was justified because somehow they're not willing to do the little and the middle level and whatever. It's all or nothing for Iran, right? They don't want to shoot us, they don't want to bomb us, they don't want to, it's nukes. That's it, nukes. Right? We're gonna leave Americans alone until we get nukes, and then we're gonna bomb them. Compared to America, when it comes to killing civilians of other countries, Iran is a better country. That perhaps is the only context that they're a better country. Bad faith actor will focus on that I said that at all. But it is demonstrably true that they are better than America when it comes to killing civilians. Look at how much we bombed them the first time we bombed them. And they barely did anything. But we're supposed to be afraid of them. I think they should be afraid of us. I think many countries around the globe should be afraid of America. And unfortunately, as a result, I think self-fulfilling prophecy. Americans irrationally fearing other countries that don't even care enough to come to our country and do anything. And that allows them to support our government doing devastating things in other countries, which unfortunately most likely leads to the threats becoming real. And unfortunately, that makes these people with their irrational fears feel like they were right. Right? That quiet kid that wasn't really violent, just a couple fights he was in, that was it. Not a violent kid, left alone. People saying he's a threat, he's a threat, he's a threat. Then they go and they put him in the hospital a few times. Now he's really a threat. And then when he does something really bad, then they'll say, see, I told you. How long is it going to be before we get an actual attack from Iran as a result of us messing with them? And then all these people go around and they say, we told you so. Hamster wheel. How do we get up the hamster wheel? I don't have an answer for that. The only thing I can say is it's next to impossible for us to get off of this hamster wheel with our current media ecosystem, especially the independent media, the folks who like to pretend like the big issue is mainstream media, which they're bad, but nothing compared to independent media where there's no rules whatsoever, no standards whatsoever. Everybody for themselves, chasing views and clicks, fanning the flames, getting rich off of the destruction of their own country. Some would look at me as being a traitor for pointing out that we've killed more civilians than Iran, but they wouldn't consider being a traitor someone who is fanning the flames and deceiving people, pushing them to support the politicians that get us in wars we don't need to be in, which leads to casualties. That's not being a traitor, but I'm a traitor for pointing out the facts that we've killed so many civilians, right? I'm wrong for pointing out the civilian casualties of America, but Ben Shapiro isn't wrong for supporting politicians who lead us to kill all these civilians. Make it make sense. Oh boy, here we go. If you're, I already addressed this point. If you say Iran has killed civilians, I didn't make a claim that they haven't killed civilians, right? The claim is that we have killed far more civilians than they have. So relative to them, relative to us, they've killed no one. If you punch somebody 5 times, six rounds, and you punch them 5 times, they punch you 100 times, you didn't punch them at all. If you do the math, what is it? 0.3% of the punches came from you. So that rounds out to 0, right? So basically you haven't punched them at all. Obviously, literally you've punched someone. If you want to really argue the margins, and yes, they have killed American civilians, right? But the reality is, compared to us, they've killed no one. And we certainly have no right at all whatsoever to even talk about how many civilians Iran has killed, right? That is the equivalent of someone who is a rapist, who's raped many women, pointing out the fact that somebody else raped one person, maybe, right? If you've done so much, shut your mouth about this other person. That other person is bad too, right? But if you are so guilty, you lose the right to say anything. We as Americans have no right to say anything about Iran killing any Americans. right? Until we see 10 million people at least in the streets protesting against wars, saying that our government should stop doing what they're doing, this needs to stop. Until that happens, we as the Americans have lost the right to say anything about Iran killing civilians. We need to get our shit in order first. That is the equivalent of the leader of North Korea talking about anybody else's country about how they treat their civilians. Shut your trap, North Korean leader. You have no right to talk about any other country about freedoms and how you treat your civilians. Shut your trap. North Korea, no right to say anything about that. America, no right to be talking about Iran and killing civilians. Guy who's raped 12 people, no right to talk about any other guy that may have done it once or twice or something. Shut your trap. When you are so much more guilty than the person you're pointing a finger at, shut your mouth. That's my policy. This is the Debate Me channel. Debate me in the comment section below. Click on the like button, subscribe, smash that bell. Be well. And in case I didn't make it abundantly clear, I am a retard. So says, I don't know why it's hiding your comment. I said show it. Oh, okay. I don't know if someone blocked it or whatever. But that's what Eric said. Evil is evil, says Jamal. Ain't that so? All right, guys. I got a busy day. I'm behind on my weed suppression. I should have put whatever that stuff is called to suppress the weeds, so I could save myself the trouble later on in the year. I'm gonna get that done and get on with my day. I got so much stuff to do. Anyway, until next time, thanks for the like, really appreciate it. Good to see you, Mariah. I was saying what you're saying is so true. All right. High vibration. All right, guys, enjoy your weekend, man. And enjoy your high gas prices. It's worth it. We got to stop Iran. Iran is a threat to America. Well, if they're not a threat before, they're going to be a threat soon. We're going to make sure of that, right? That's what we're up to. Okay.